Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kara, and I'm with the Ohio LTAP Center here at ODOT, and I'll be your host for this webinar. Today's research results webinar is Guidance for Sustainable Integration of Automated Transportation Technologies, and we're excited to have Abby Morgan and Morgan Dean as our presenters today. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items to ensure a smooth webinar experience for everyone. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the questions panel on your screen.
At least it's
you can type your questions there and we will address them during the dedicated Q&A session at the end. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties or have any other issues, feel free to use the chat panel to communicate with our team and we'll do our best to assist you. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be made available to all registered attendees after the session. All right, with that out of the way, let's get started. It's my pleasure to hand it over to Abby. Abby, the virtual floor is yours.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are excited to be presenting to you an introduction to a new guidebook. This guidebook was designed to help public transportation agencies sustainably integrate automated transportation technologies into your existing roadway networks. As Kara said, I'm Abby Morgan. I'm a principal engineer with Kittleson and Associates, and I was the principal investigator for this research. Also joining me today to deliver this presentation is my colleague Morgan Dean, who was the lead researcher for the guidebook. Our team was also supported by Michael Baker International, who developed the materials on digital infrastructure readiness and personal delivery device deployments. And we were also supported by Paul Carlson of Automated Roads, who supported the development of the roadway design readiness guidance. So let's jump right in. I wanted to give a special thanks to the Automated Vehicle Pooled Fund study. This research was funded by the AV Pooled Fund, and our project's panel members represented the 9 funding states. This was led by Ohio Department of Transportation and Drive Ohio, and was supported by the Departments of Transportation from Connecticut, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Texas, Virginia, and Washington State. Each one of our panel members provided very valuable insights throughout the project, as well as on our deliverable reviews. So if you have any questions or follow-up, I would highly recommend that you reach out, especially if one of these panel members is local to you or in your home state. We also wanted to acknowledge several groups who shared their time and their experience with our team of researchers throughout the project. These groups helped us understand some of their firsthand experience with their own automated vehicle deployments or with their experience planning or advocating for different uses of automated vehicles. The other folks that helped us through interviews included the City of Arlington, Texas, the City of Peachtree Corners, Georgia, Connecticut Department of Transportation, the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, the Maryland Department of Disabilities, the National Federation of the Blind, Seattle Department of Transportation, and the United Spinal Association. So as you can see, this research was really a compilation of a lot of input from many different groups, and we're really grateful for everyone's participation on the project. So over the next hour, our plan is we are going to introduce you to this new guidebook resource by explaining a few things. First, who is this guidebook written for? Second of all, why is now the right time for public agencies to be planning for automated vehicles? And then we want to leave you with some feasible near-term actions that your agencies could take to plan for automated vehicles, whether you're just getting started or whether you're ready to start assessing your infrastructure readiness, if you want to update your plans or policies, or if you're looking for guidance on how to engage with your community to build trust or engage with your peers to share lessons learned. So to start us off, I'm going to turn it over to Morgan, who's going to share some background and motivation for the project.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Morgan Dean. I'm an engineering associate with Kittleson. And so before we kind of get into the specifics of the guidebook content, we wanted to first outline 4 key themes or assumptions that were really fundamental to developing the guidance. So the first point we want to hit on is that automated vehicles are here today on our roadways. And so, for example, on this slide, this is a picture that Abby took when she was riding in a Tesla robotaxi in Austin. Similarly, I live in the city of Phoenix out in Arizona. And so pretty much every time I go to or from the airport, I take a Waymo. Similarly, when friends and family come to town, I'm like, we have to take a Waymo, and I take them around downtown, right? And so, point being that automated vehicles are operating on our existing roads. And the roads that they're operating on most of the time were not necessarily planned or designed for AV operations, and often are not maintained with AVs in mind, or at least are not maintained with AVs being the priority concern. The second point we want to hit on is that AVs for a very long time will be operating in a mixed fleet of human-driven vehicles. And so as a result, we really do want to look for opportunities where infrastructure improvements can benefit not only automated vehicle performance, but also human drivers and other road users. And I really cannot stress this point enough that investing in elements that support AV operations really do support the safety of all of your road users. Close to none of what we're going to talk about today is AV specific. And so, for example, most of the newer vehicles today that are operating on our roads have advanced driver assist systems. And so the most common of those systems, and probably the most prevalent, would be automatic emergency braking. And over time, these systems are rapidly becoming more and more prevalent in the vehicle fleet and on the roadways. If you're interested in detailed information on the penetration rate of these systems in the vehicle fleet and their estimated future prevalence, you can see the forecasts that are made by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. But the point we want to get at today is that these systems use many of the same sensors that AVs use, for example, forward-facing cameras. And so as a result, when you make roadway improvements like clear lane markings, clear signage, and creating and maintaining good visibility, it doesn't just benefit the AVs, but it also benefits the human drivers, as well as the newer vehicles with advanced driver assist systems. The third thing we want to hit on is that while we're starting to see driverless AVs operating in some cities across the country, it's not known with certainty yet what the widespread adoption timeline or impacts will be. So to date, most deployments have occurred in sunny states, right? So California, Arizona, Texas, Florida, and Waymo does have a map of what's next, as well as where they have driving experience. So for example, when I was in DC last month for TRB, I saw a Waymo on the road, and it had someone in the driver's seat. And then when you look at Waymo's map, DC does fall under their what's next category. I also had a friend report to me probably close to 2 years ago now that they saw one, again, with an operator in the driver's seat, but they saw a Waymo in Buffalo, New York, which again, when you look at Waymo's map, you see Buffalo, New York under their list of driving experience cities. So sometimes we have a general sense of what one deployer is thinking, but we don't know about others, and we don't know about timeline or about potential impacts. And so really right now, more than ever, is the time to be forward thinking. And it's also the best time to be listening to our community members to understand what their challenges and concerns are. And the fourth key point I want to hit on before we get into more detailed guidebook information is that because this is a technology that is rapidly evolving, it's really important that agency long-range transportation plans and policies are flexible so that they can adapt to technological changes as well as travel behavior changes. And again, this is not something that's AV specific, right? We're living in an era where technology is rapidly evolving, not just automated vehicle technology. And so developing plans and policies that are flexible can benefit you in multiple different spaces when it comes to emerging technology. So we can jump to the next slide, and we'll start getting into some of the more guidebook specific information here. Yeah, so we want to start off with who is this guidebook written for? And so the guidebook is intended to be a one-stop resource for transportation agencies and local governments that are responsible for operating and maintaining roadways. And so we're referring to these entities as roadway infrastructure owner operators. And they're typically state departments of transportation, municipalities, or even toll road authorities. And these entities may be responsible for infrastructure readiness, land use planning, even things like curb management or funding. They're likely in charge of managing local street design standards, setting and enforcing traffic laws, and ultimately decision making. And so this guidebook is going to help those entities answer these questions when your leadership or the public are asking about what it means for automated vehicles to come to town, and also how we can prepare our roads to support safe and efficient travel for all road users.
All right, thanks, Morgan. So now you know who we've written the guidebook for. So let's talk now about what is in the guide. Well, the Automated Vehicle Pooled Fund Study Group recognized that there has been a lot of research on automated vehicle road readiness. Yet roadway infrastructure owner-operators can't look to each and every separate study to try to find the guidance that they're looking for. Instead, they needed clear, realistic, and feasible guidance to help them reduce their learning curves, to mitigate risks, to optimize limited resources that we know everyone is struggling with, and to increase public acceptance of agency investments into emerging transportation technologies. And so what we've done in this guidebook is that we've compiled the best practices and the lessons learned from many different recent and even ongoing research projects to give you one single resource. The way we've organized the chapters of the guide are to provide information on how to prepare your agency or organization for automated vehicles. So we're talking about things like how to set goals or how to understand your staffing needs. We've also got a chapter that will provide you with general roadway design recommendations. And I'm going to give you a hint here also. We have a lot of specific design details that we've put in an appendix. So if that is within your field of expertise or your interest, lots and lots of research going into specific design updates that can really support automated vehicle operations. Again, as Morgan said, though, the key was trying to find co-benefits where we can support human travelers as well as automated vehicles. We have a separate chapter that provides guidance on how to prepare your digital infrastructure. And so this includes things like data sharing and cybersecurity best practices. And there's even a chapter as well as some standalone fact sheets made for lawmakers if your state or local agencies are looking to develop policies related to automated vehicles. And finally, we have chapters that provide guidance for agencies that may actually want to plan their own automated vehicle deployment. So we've got some specific guidance based on a lot of lessons learned that is really honed in and specific for deployments of low-speed automated shuttles or personal delivery devices, sidewalk robots. And then at the end of each chapter, we give you resources if you want to take a deeper dive into any of these topics. What this guidebook also says, as Morgan said, this guidebook was designed to help you answer questions that your leadership or the public are likely asking, and also to help you inform agency decision-making on things like your roadway operations and maintenance resource needs. As design changes and as maintenance practices change, are you going to need different practices, additional resources, additional funding? And there's guidance there to help inform your decision-making on that. There's also information to help inform decision-making on what the impacts of automated vehicles may be on agency funding needs or revenue impacts. And we've got information on decision-making related to potential future technology scenarios that you might want to model in your long-range plans, as well as decision-making on your state and local policies or regulations that are needed to support AV operations or to have the decision-making behind you creating an AV supportive infrastructure on your roads. So when is the right time to start planning? As we've said, in many of our communities, we are starting to see automated vehicles, but we acknowledge in many of our communities, we do not yet have fully driverless vehicle operations. So you might be asking, okay, so why should I worry about automated vehicle road readiness today? Well, as Morgan said before, AV technology is advancing rapidly. We do, in fact, have fully driverless operations in several states. And as Morgan said, many of the vehicles that are on our road today with their advanced driver assist systems are using the same or very similar cameras that an automated vehicle would, like that forward-looking camera. And so as a result, the time is now. Now is the time for you to start planning for automated vehicles if we really want to try to maximize their potential benefits. And so some of the potential benefits that we are planning around would be things like the possibility of reducing crash frequency or severity. We're also hoping that we might see increased mobility options for all travelers. Someone who is not able to drive today, whether they're a young child or an older adult or someone who just doesn't drive, we want to provide new mobility options for travelers. We're also hoping that automated vehicles could potentially reduce congestion if vehicles drive more efficiently than humans do. And they definitely have possibilities to help us improve our decision making. If we can enhance decision making through better data or a better understanding of how our system is performing. There's also the possibility that automated vehicles could help reduce vehicle emissions. If automated vehicles are electric or if their driving behaviors are more efficient than, an aggressive commuter human driver, we might see some vehicle emissions reductions as a result. And finally, automated vehicles could have the potential for new economic opportunities. They could bring new businesses into your communities or enhance the travel experience for your residents and visitors. So there's a lot that we have to plan for and why we want to achieve all these benefits. We also want to plan now for automated vehicles to make sure that we manage or mitigate any potential changes that aren't in line with our local goals. Some things that we need to look out for include impacts to revenue sources. So for example, will vehicle registration and sales tax revenue reduce if automated vehicles are shared rather than having the same amount of personally owned vehicle ownership rates that we have today? Also, what about if automated vehicles are actually programmed to comply with traffic laws and parking rules? Will we see a reduction in traffic and parking violation revenue at the local level? This might not seem like that much of a game changer, but think about where that revenue is funding. In many cities, school crossing guard funds are funded from parking violations. So if we aren't seeing vehicles that are needing to park or contributing to that funding revenue, where are we going to find some alternative revenue sources? We'd like to be aware of those impacts now so that we can start planning for alternatives. We're also anticipating that, similar to human-driven ride-hail impacts, automated vehicles might reduce parking demands. If you're not driving your personal vehicle to the destination and looking for parking there, instead of an increased demand in parking, what you might see is an increased demand for curb space, where these vehicles, much like human-driven ride-hail, are looking to make short-term pickup drop-offs at the curb rather than a dedicated parking space for a longer duration. Another change that we're looking at is that AVs might be able to increase roadway capacity if the vehicles are connected and they're following at closer headways than human drivers. That could certainly help us. And also, if AVs are able to reduce the monetary or time costs of travel, we might start seeing some shifts in population or in employment locations if people are willing to travel farther in an AV than they are in their own human-driven vehicle, say for their commute trip each morning. So now that you see that there are many benefits and impacts that we're planning for, you might be asking, and hopefully you're asking, all right, let's get into the meat of it. How can we start to actually work with our agencies to proactively plan for AVs? So what we're going to do on these next slides is we're going to share you with top 3 actions that your agencies can take to get started with AV planning, to assess your readiness, to update your local plans and policies, and to engage with your community and peers. So let me turn it back to Morgan to get us started.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. So like Abby said, we've got 4 slides for you that each highlight the top 3 actions of the different category. So what's on this slide here is we're talking about the top 3 low-hanging efforts that you can prioritize to get started if AV planning is completely new to your agency. And I will make a side note that in the guidebook, we do have a complete checklist of all of the different actions that we're recommending that your agency can take. And we do identify each of them as either a baseline item, a medium reach item, or a high reach action. And so I think one of the final slides in this deck today, we do show a quick preview of this checklist, but a lot of the ones we're going to be talking through are more of those kind of like baseline actions you can take, starting with these 3 here. So the first action you can take to get started would be to identify an internal automated vehicle champion. And so you want this to be an individual who is capable of acting as a liaison between your agency and decision makers to help those decision makers understand how automated vehicles can impact your communities. So you want your AV champ to be somebody who is well networked throughout your jurisdiction. You want them to be passionate about implementing new technologies and also pragmatic about how the tech can be used to support local goals. And so they don't necessarily have to be an AV expert. If they are, awesome, but alternatively, they can just be someone who's generally excited about the potential that AVs have, to the point that they're willing to stay up to date and in the know, and they're willing to ask questions and make connections. So just generally someone who's eager to keep up with developments in the AV space. And of course, these things don't change overnight, right? So you want someone who's dedicated and committed to long-term efforts in the region as well. As a second step, you want to establish goals or a vision for what the role of automated vehicles in your community will be. And ideally, you would like your goals to align with your agency's mission and any other important documentation, such as your long-range transportation plan. So as examples, your goals might relate to safety, they might relate to accessibility, or even resiliency. And so once you've done those first 2 steps, you've got your AV champion and you've established goals or a vision, you can then take things a step further by assessing your agency's organizational readiness to prepare for AV deployments. And so to do this, you'll want to figure out what actions your agency needs to take and what resources you need to take those actions. And so some of the questions you may want to ask yourself are, do we have the knowledge and staff resources to measure how AVs will impact local transportation, travel behavior, land use, and safety? You might also want to ask, do we have a data collection method to measure success? And to the former question, the AV champion is someone who can kind of help you get started on assessing where the knowledge is, where the staff resources are. To the latter question, we do have an entire section in the guidebook that does talk about getting your data ready, that can get you start thinking about data collection and measuring success. Other questions you might want to ask to assess organizational readiness is, do we understand the potential financial impacts of AVs and AV supportive infrastructure? So that gets at what Abby was previously talking about, is do we need to be looking for new funding sources, such as establishing dynamic curbs-based pricing to mechanisms as an alternative to on-street parking fees to overcome revenue impacts. You also want to be thinking about who are our partners for planning deployments or partners for coordinating with AV industry on private deployments. And then you also want to ask, does our staff and community need specialized education or training? So do first responders need training on how to safely interact with driverless AVs? And as an example, on this slide, we do have a picture from a first responder training program that Waymo hosted for Maryland agencies. And being in Phoenix, I am always getting Instagram videos of weird Waymo behaviors, because those like weird edge case behaviors are always the things that blow up in the news. And in one instance, there was, a video of a Waymo driving the wrong way. In another, there was an instance where law enforcement had in real time paused vehicle activity at an intersection to perform an arrest, and the Waymo continued to move through the intersection. And these weird case scenarios are not reasons not to believe that AVs can help us achieve our goals, right? Rather, it's reason to make sure that we keep all the relevant parties engaged and in the know, and that we provide them with the resources to handle these one-off scenarios. So in summary, by identifying an AV champion, defining your goals, and also understanding your organizational readiness, you can prioritize and communicate your resource needs to your decision makers and your elected officials. Then if we jump to our next slide, we can take it to the next step, And here, now that you've assessed your agency's organizational readiness, it's time to assess your roadway infrastructure readiness to support AV operations. And so again, here we're going to highlight the top 3 actions you can get started on to do this. So step 1 would be to conduct an automated vehicle road readiness assessment, which can be accomplished in about 4 steps. So step 1, learn how automated vehicles sense the roadway. And again, since by this point you've identified an AV champion, this is certainly something that they can support. Step 2 would be to understand what road conditions best support AV operations. And you can look to this guidebook for that type of information. Step 3 would then be to measure and rank the roadways based on these conditions. And step 4 would be to use those rankings to identify priority corridors for improvement. And this 4th step really gets at item 2 on this slide, because we can refer to these priority corridors also as smart corridors. And so these smart corridors are where you would want to prioritize your funding and other resources. So these are corridors where you think AVs are most likely to operate, or where you think AV operations are most likely to be supported by infrastructure improvements. And as Abby mentioned earlier, as part of this guidebook, we have developed a very detailed appendix that contains tons of very specific examples and guidance of what we mean when we talk about infrastructure improvements to support AV operations. And we do have a couple examples on this slide. So one example would be to implement vertical signal heads instead of horizontal signal heads. Now, why? With vertical signal heads being the most common, horizontal signals can confuse black and white camera systems, right? I'd be interested to know, if I only showed the black and white photo that's on the upper right portion of the slide, how many people would know which color is which? And to that point, they can also confuse colorblind road users, right? So again, here's an example of how AV supporting infrastructure also supports safety for other road users. Now, we do recognize that something like replacing horizontal with vertical signal heads may be an upgrade that's a little bit more resource consuming. And so this is an example of the type of upgrade you can really focus on implementing on those priority corridors. So this is a place where having those priority corridors can be really helpful in identifying where do we start. However, there are also lower resource consuming upgrades that you can make, that you could implement more systemically. If you do these on your priority corridors and you say, oh, we still have resources, like we can implement these across the network, right? And so an example of that would be the school zone, the school speed limit zone signs that we have on the left here. And so you can see that top sign is very confusing. So there's like text written over other text. And then when you do identify what the text says, there's multiple different time ranges. And so think about, cognitive load and human processing. If a human sees the sign, first they're trying to identify what it says. Then they're trying to think about what time is it now? Does that fall within the time limits on the sign? And then are the times on the sign when I do need to be going 20 miles per hour or when I don't need to be going 20 miles per hour, right? And so it's much simpler to replace this sign with the sign on the bottom, which is a more binary type of information, where is it flashing or is it not? If it's flashing, I go the speed. If it's not flashing, then I don't have to go 20 miles per hour, right? And so again, that bottom sign is preferred not only for AVs, but also for human drivers as well. And so then the third and final action we have on this slide is really more related to data sharing. So when data is shared, formatted, stored, and evaluated properly, it can provide significant benefits. And so it can tell you about the safety and operations of AVs on your local network. It can also tell you how well your road conditions support AVs and how AVs are impacting land use and travel behavior. So your agency should assess your resources to collect data, to format and manage it, and to evaluate raw data from these vehicles. And your agency should develop policies, internal processes, and procurement requirements for cybersecurity and data management security, and also even data interoperability. So for example, you could implement data standards like the Work Zone Data Exchange, which is the federal initiative to provide a common format, up-to-date information about work zones. And so sharing that data can even help AVs receive timely alerts to inform their routing and operational safety. So in summary, conducting your AV roadway readiness assessment, identifying your smart or priority corridors, and assessing your agency's data-related resources can help you to assess system readiness. And then as a next step, you can begin thinking through plans and policies to help support long-term integration and implementation. And so for that, I will pass it back to Abby.
All right, thanks, Morgan. So moving right along, let's say you have defined your goals, you have assessed your agency and your road readiness, you've identified some of your priority corridors where you'll invest in upgrades first. At this point, you're going to be ready to start integrating automated vehicles into your long-range planning. So as you conduct your long-range plans, you should be planning for and modeling a number of future scenarios that consider multiple use cases and multiple adoption trends for automated vehicles in your community. So as we said before, we don't know with certainty exactly when an AV will come to your town in large numbers to make a sustainable change on travel behavior or travel patterns. So we want to instead model a number of different scenarios so that we can start seeing what the potential impacts would be. And it will basically let us know what might we see in land use or travel behavior changes as a result of AVs, if we perhaps have a pretty high adoption rate up front, or if it's a much longer, slower time for them to adopt. By understanding what these different ranges could be and the potential future scenarios, we can then develop policies to help us maximize the potential benefits and mitigate any potential negative impacts that we might see, so that we want AVs to align with our agency goals. These are our goals for safety, efficiency, mobility, accessibility, and land use. If you don't want to see a lot of urban sprawl, then we may need land use policies that would change that. If you say it's okay, keep growing and growing, people might be willing to make longer trips in an automated vehicle for a daily commute than they are willing to when they have to deal with the stress of congestion when they're driving them themselves. So there's a number of different impacts we want to be looking for that we might develop policies to try to control. But it's really important, as Morgan said earlier, that our policies need to be flexible. They also need to be technology agnostic. We are not writing this for one particular specific use case of a technology that is rapidly evolving. We want our policies to be able to adapt to technological evolution, and we want to continue to monitor what the real world impacts of automated vehicles are in our community, so that we plan and our plans and our review processes can be updated. We want to look frequently at what the impacts are, and we want to assess our policies and update them as needed. Again, we are making our best educated guesses at this point. Some of the assumptions we're making as researchers today are based on what we think the impacts will be. It's going to be very important to keep monitoring those real world impacts and making adjustments. The other thing that you're going to want to do is you are going to want to plan for future funding needs. So AV, automated vehicle supportive infrastructure, may require additional funding resources for you to implement, also to operate and to maintain. And so we may need additional funding for that new and improved infrastructure improvements that we've been talking about today, and that we provide more guidance on in the guidebook. So think about today how you're going to allocate different funding resources as you need, depending on those future scenarios. And again, this is why it's important for us to be projecting out what our needs will be in the future, so we can allocate the funding today or start allocating it today. And our last list of actions is the most critical. The first thing you need to do is you need to listen to your community. The applications and the technologies are evolving. Deployments are expanding. Every day, somebody new is getting exposed to this technology. The things that we know today based on past technology, they might not apply in the future to more improved applications, more improved systems. So it's important that we keep listening and engaging with our community members, with advocacy groups, as well as with our decision makers, so that we understand what their challenges and concerns are. This type of ongoing engagement is going to help us overcome resistance and build trust within communities and decision makers. The second thing that you need to be doing is we really need you to put in the effort to stay in the know. As the technology changes, new best practices are being discovered. There's a lot of current ongoing research that we just don't have the final results for yet, but it's going to really help us learn more about impacts and about how these systems operate. And so it's really important for you to want to continue learning. There are ways that you can stay in the know. You can read papers and publications. You can attend conferences or trainings. You can attend peer exchanges, and you can attend webinars like this one. And finally, we need you to share your knowledge. So your peers are your greatest strength. Please talk to each other openly and honestly. Help build each other, build each other's knowledge base up. Share your lessons learned with each other, and share your lessons learned related to things like planning, procurement. How did you buy this new technology that wasn't on a pre-approved vendor list? What did you do for your procurement strategies? How are you dealing with local enforcement of your traffic laws with these new vehicles? What about data collection methods and performance monitoring? There's a lot that we're going to keep learning, and so sharing your lessons learned through things like short write-ups. It doesn't have to be a massive report or a huge publication, but a short write-up, a conference presentation, and sharing updates during peer meetings is truly valuable and will help us continue learning. And so now, hopefully, you are ready to get started. Where do you begin? Well, the guidebook is your best resource to help you learn what actions you should take, and also to learn more about the different research projects that went into these recommendations. So like we said, we just tried to compile all of the best knowledge that's out there. There are some really wonderful studies that you can learn more on, and there also are some ongoing research topics that we called out that you might want to keep an eye on as those are wrapped up and we have new findings. To make your life easier, we love checklists, and so we created for you a user guide, and this is one of our appendix. The idea here is it's a standalone checklist that you can print off, and it provides a short description of all of the different recommended actions that you can take to support automated vehicles. As Morgan said, we've ranked each one of these actions in a low, medium, or high level of effort. And hopefully it's something that you can start working with your agency, your automated vehicle champion can start working through and just start checking off where you're at and have an understanding of how ready your organization is and what you need to do to complete the other actions. And finally, my closing is my final ask of you. As I've said, please, throughout your journey, look for opportunities where you can share your knowledge through reports or presentations or working group meetings. We really want to support each other and learn about ongoing research so that we can keep sharing what new challenges come up as well as new solutions that are found. And so we hope that you have learned something today. We are grateful for you joining our presentation. We hope that you'll check out our guidebook. And if you want to scan this QR code, this should take you to the guidebook, but we'll also drop a link to it in the meeting chat. So please check out the publication. There is a lot more detail, and we are happy to use the rest of our time to answer any questions that you have. I'm going to just leave contact information up for myself and for Morgan if you have any additional questions that you want to reach out for us. And otherwise, Kara, if you would help us see if we've got any audience questions, we'll do our best to answer them. And if there are any questions that need a bit of additional research, we might follow up with you offline or after the presentation today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Abby and Morgan, for that insightful presentation. The question portion is now open, so please put any questions that you have into the questions panel, and Abby and Morgan will answer your questions. As of right now, we don't have any questions just yet, so that's a good sign. You told everybody everything they needed to know. Let's see.
Oh, yes, and thank you. I also want to make a plug for accelerateav.org. I think if we can put that in the chat to everybody, we'll share that link as well. The Automated Vehicle Pooled Funds Study has created the website accelerateav.org. It is a great resource for you to share questions and information. And that's just another really great resource where you could be sharing your lessons learned. But also if you have questions or any feedback, that's another really great forum for you to connect, share your feedback, and also meet additional peers that could be your partners on future deployments and future lessons learned.
Love that. All right. I went ahead and put that in the chat for everyone so that they can grab that if they would like. We have let's see here. First question, what are the attributes of an AV champion?
Awesome. Yeah, great question. Morgan, would you like to take that one?
Sure, yeah. I think really the key attribute that you would want for an AV champion is somebody who is willing to kind of take the extra steps to do research on their own, to reach out to people who have the information that they don't and ask questions and build connections. Someone who's going to want to go to conferences to learn about the state of the practice and lessons learned from other deployments. You really just want somebody who is excited. They don't have to be an expert on automated vehicle technology. They just have to be curious and excited. Truly. I don't know if there's anything you want to add onto that, Abby.
Yeah, I think that is a great start. The folks who are our panel members are for sure the AV champions within their states. This doesn't necessarily need to be, it is usually at a local level, not a full-time job. So like Morgan's saying, it's something that you're just interested and willing to keep participating in. I think some of the key things are being really well connected. So as you've seen from some of the things we've been talking about today, sometimes automated vehicle readiness has to do with roadway design infrastructure. It's also long-range planning. It's your real-time curb management. It's your policies. And so having someone who is well-connected throughout your jurisdiction can really help you work across departments, across even agencies, or any sort of silos or anything like that that may be up. And so that I think is another thing that is really helpful. If that person can be well connected, they can just keep bringing the right people together to the table, which is really what we're trying to do here. This is a new topic. There's a lot to learn. We just want to have that person bring new information to the different departments and then have a single point of contact. So as you start actually getting deployments into your area, it will be very important to identify one single point of contact that the automated vehicle industry would reach out to. In many cases, that has been the same person who we're calling your internal AV champion, but we want one point of contact that industry could call if they have questions. We're seeing some sort of wonky performance at a certain intersection, help us understand, how your intersection's designed or what we could do here. And by giving them clear lines of communication will really help. And it only helps if that person is also staying up to date on the different technologies. Great question.
I think something else that's good to mention too is I think it is important to establish, a single individual point of contact for your agency, but I realize that it could also be a daunting task for one person to take this on, especially if your agency has no AV planning experience up to this point. And so I think there's definitely an opportunity to have, two people tag team this where one person acts as the outward facing point of contact and is doing all of the acting as the liaison essentially, but maybe they have somebody supporting them internally in the background as well to stay up to date, because that can certainly be a lot to get up to speed on for one person.
Wonderful, thank you. Those were great answers. Okay, next question. Were there any adverse weather considerations made in the ODD of AVs and what they should and shouldn't do in these conditions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the approach that we took with this guidebook was to write it for the public agencies and the roadway infrastructure owner operators. And so the public agencies in these cases, we were assuming you're not the one developing the automated vehicle, and therefore you're not the one in control to define the operational design domain where that vehicle is designed to operate. We did work with a number of great states that do not lie in the Sun Belt. So Minnesota, Michigan, we know that there's a lot of testing up there, and we will acknowledge through our work with them that in some cases it means that they're not seeing. It's not that no testing is being done. There is testing, and both states are doing a really great job of championing it. It's also a very different situation when we talk about, hey, have great lane striping, have clearly marked striped lanes. And you simply can't do that when there's snow on the ground. And so I think it's been really helpful. What we're learning in the past year, and I would say really, in my opinion, 2026 is going to be the fun year of winter weather testing, I hope. But we're starting to see a lot more information being shared and automated vehicle developers testing in winter climates so that we can learn more about how the vehicles operate, what sort of characteristics of our roads we might need, and things that we might need to do for maintenance or for road design that are more specific to winter weather climates. So we weren't in a position to define the operational design domain, but we were trying to work with states to help them understand how they can understand that terminology, and again, why it may be important to plan for maintenance programs so that they can do their best to create an operational design domain that reflects what the vehicle was designed for. I hope that answers the question. If not, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can also speak a little bit to certain weather conditions, not so much the winter weather conditions, but the guidebook in that appendix where we talk about roadway design, specific roadway design guidance, we do talk a little bit about, like, we acknowledge that certain conditions in the environment, like sunlight, glare, rain, that kind of adverse weather conditions can affect detection of these systems of certain roadway elements like striping and signage and all that. And so we do provide some more specific guidance about things you can do on the roadway to sort of combat those more adverse conditions and elements.
That's great. All right, next question. Ooh. Are there any research funding opportunities that you are aware of?
Good question. I don't exactly know what type of research you're asking about there, but I will say I think we are on the cusp of some really exciting, hopeful federal funding coming out soon with the next reauthorization bill, just where automated vehicles are such a priority right now between for Congress, as we've seen with the Self-Drive Act moving forward and things like that. So I think that if we were to see some of those things in the next transportation reauthorization bill, we might get some pretty exciting opportunities for federal grants to help push forward innovation. There are some projects at state levels working on research as well, and so and I apologize, I don't know who asked the question or where you're from, but I would encourage you to look into your own state's Department of Transportation to see what sort of opportunities they might have for partnering on research or deployments. And of course, at the national level, the Transportation Research Board and the National Cooperative Highway Research Program sometimes will have some different research projects looking into this. I think we are looking at some new opportunities for human factors research to go into some of the development of our understanding of how the riders interact with automated vehicles or the remote drivers are interacting with them as well. So lots of new research on the horizon to look out for.
Sounds like it. That's awesome. Okay, as of right now, we have one question. So if anyone has questions that they would like to send in, please go ahead and get those in. Currently, the last question we have is, what are the differences between the systems of autonomous vehicles and CV2X vehicles?
Yeah, great question. So what we were talking about focusing mostly here were vehicles that are able to perform all of the driving tasks that a human driver would normally perform. So things like braking, acceleration, steering, navigational control, that's what we were kind of focusing on. And so a lot of the design guidance went into how do those vehicles perform those tasks and what sort of sensor systems are they using. Uh, the the cellular vehicle to everything, or CV to X, connected vehicle type of technology, was a subcomponent of what we looked at. So we do have some guidance in the guidebook, and there's a whole chapter on digital infrastructure, a slightly different term, but there we're talking about the ability to share information, data, and messaging over cellular networks or over wireless networks. So a lot of the assumptions that went into this was that cellular vehicle to everything communication could support automated vehicles, but we were also looking at onboard sensors of the vehicles that may not require a connected vehicle connection. So things like forward-looking cameras or radar or LiDAR, things like that would be on the vehicle. So we've got a whole chapter on how to get your infrastructure readiness ready for connected vehicles. That is certainly a major assumption for some of the things like capacity improvements of roads. If we are going to assume that vehicles will follow very, very closely together in a platooning sort of a scenario, I think one of the fundamental assumptions there is that those vehicles are communicating with each other so that they can follow more closely. And so if we aren't seeing that type of connectivity, we may not see those capacity adjustments. So it all kind of goes hand in hand. Yeah, hopefully that clarifies. We were considering cellular vehicle to everything communication as a supporting technology for automation. And we were presenting, or we've presented guidance again towards the public agency and what sort of infrastructure readiness and data sharing and cybersecurity protocols you may need in place to support that technology.
Wonderful. Okay, we have another question coming to us from Southern California. Hi, shout out to Southern California.
Nice. Thank you for letting us know where you're from.
Right. They were saying that they don't experience many rainy days, but when they do, they can have roads that flood. And so they're asking about any lessons that have been learned that can be shared regarding unexpected issues like flooding.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you're talking to the right people, because Morgan in Phoenix and I'm from South Florida. So we all deal with some very intense rains that can lead to flooding. And again, I think some of these are why we want to be looking at co-benefits, because let's be real, the blinding sort of whiteout rain that we get in all these types of scenarios does not make it easy for human drivers to travel either. Perhaps an automated vehicle might be a little safer by saying this is an unsafe condition and I should pull over, where, you know, a Florida driver will just put their flashers on and go even faster in the left lane. I joke, but for real. So I think there's a lot of information that we can be sharing as far as where we have microclimates of weather, you know, so where is that really heavy rain happening? Are there certain routes that it's located on, or certain segments of the freeway that we're coming up to? If we can share weather information, if we can share road closure information, and again, there's a lot of ways that communities can be partners with all travelers. So things like updating information to Waze or other type of navigational systems that you can say this road is flooded, it's closed. As soon as you get that information, if you're using remote sensors or however you're being informed that that type of flooding event is happening, really there are great opportunities for you to broadcast that information so all travelers can get that information, including your transit drivers, your other drivers, and the automated vehicles. And that's, I think, what we're going to be wanting to try to do, is try to get that best information out for folks. So again, other design systems are happening from the standpoint of the AV developer, but we're focusing on the public agency. So I hope that answered your question.
Wonderful. Okay, next question. Let's see here. What guidance is there in data for sharing IOOs? Data sharing with AVs can be beneficial to their operation, but each state DOT may have different data formats. Was there any advice on making data from IOOs AV ready?
Yeah, great question. So yes, so your infrastructure owner operators, your roadway authorities have really wonderful data that could be beneficial for automated vehicle developers or for other travelers. Yet in some cases, you might collect and store your data a little bit differently. So there are some national programs going on to try to standardize that type of data exchange. And we have shared references to that in the guidebook. So one example Morgan gave, a single example of that would be the work zone data exchange. If we can agree to use a standardized format of how we report work zone locations, the time of operations, the location of start and end, and some other specifics about that work zone. What we're trying to do right now is use like a single use case, like work zones, and try to get good at standardizing our data, practicing good data management, when the work zone is finished, clear it out of your system. And so I think there's a lot that we can learn there. And some of the effort has been like, let's start small, let's get good with this one use case that we know would be a lifesaver, and then we can expand to other types of data. But there are other standardized data format that are out there that we're also trying to share. There's some great standardized transit data. There's some standardized multimodal data that's also available. And so we've got references to each of those in the guidebook. But yeah, I think that is going to be one of our biggest challenges, and it is not unique to us. I mean, just think about police reported crashes and how different those crash reports and narratives can be, and why we are trying to standardize, and we've worked so hard for many years to standardize those types of reports so that we have the same kind of data we can do national studies with rather than state-specific studies. So I'm not going to answer all of your questions, other than I'm going to say there are many studies that are working towards that that we've tried to reference for you in the guidebook. And we also know it's not simple, and so please keep trying. This is a long battle we're playing here to get our data clean.
That's wonderful. Okay, well, I just want to let everyone know that I just put a link to the guidebook in the chat for everyone. So if nothing else, go ahead and just click that link so that you can get there and save it later whenever you get a chance. But that'll be a really nice resource for you to get to the guidebook. That is all the time that we have for questions today. So on behalf of LTAP and ODOT, I'd like to thank Abby and Morgan once again for sharing their valuable knowledge and expertise with us. Just a couple of final reminders as we sign off. Please keep an eye on your inbox. We'll be sending out the link to the session recording to all registered attendees very soon. If you are logged in and present for the full duration of the webinar, you will receive a certificate of attendance within 5 business days. As we close out, a super short 4-question survey will pop up on your browser. If you have 60 seconds, please let us know your thoughts. It really helps us fine-tune these programs for you. Thank you all so much for being with us today. We hope you're walking away with some great insights for your work. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.